Good morning, everyone. The first cabinet of a very new council with very new faces all around the table, which, apart from the officers, of course, who continue with us all the way, hopefully. So I am really pleased that we're here and doing this. It will be as transparent a council as we can make it. Obviously, there are times when we cannot tell the public and everybody in the room everything, but we will try and be as open as possible. This cabinet meeting will actually be looking backwards because virtually everything that's on the paper has happened so far under the last administration. So things will change subtly as we go forward. We always have invited, well, over the last 4 years, opposition leaders to take part, observe, and have their bit to say about papers on the agenda, and is going to be no different now. Before that, it was less easy for people to take part, but certainly Leslie was good at allowing people to speak. So welcome, everybody. We're all learning our way through this, and the officers are still learning about us. So I will now move on with the agenda. We have apologies for absence, unfortunately, from Councillor David Basmer, who is the portfolio holder for Highways and the Environment, because he's going to a close family funeral and it's unavoidable that he's gone to that. Number 2 on the agenda is disclosable interests, and members are reminded that they must declare disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable or non-registrable interests in any matter being considered at the meeting as set out in Appendix B of the Members' Code of Conduct, and consider if they should leave the room prior to that item being considered. And I'm sure you will have sought advice from the monitoring officer if you thought you had, but at any point during the proceedings you can do that if you need to. So we move on to minutes, and confirming the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of March, to which none of this cabinet were there. So could I have a proposer and seconder, please, for those? Proposer Roger and a seconder Alex. Thank you very much. Any comments on those minutes? And putting them right are difficult since we weren't there. Thank you very much. We'll move on to public question time. So we have a number of public questions, and we have Mike Streetley and Monitoring Officer Tim Collard will be reading Mr. Streetley's question, and I will answer for David Basmer.
Thank you, Leader. His question is this: would the council please set out the steps and timescales required for cancelling the North West Relief Road project?
This is obviously something that appeared on our agenda for our manifesto and so on, and we campaigned on. So the council is currently reviewing the North West Relief Road project in order to protect the financial interests of the council. Any decision on the project and decisions on the project will need to be fully assessed and made in close liaison with those external funders involved. As such, and without this information in full, it would be unwise to commit to formal position at this stage. What I can tell you is that and it's publicly known, that we wrote to the Minister. The Minister's office came back to us yesterday wanting dates for us to meet to discuss all of this, and they have been sent dates during this month and July for us to go and either do that online or in person, because there are some significant financial impacts around the North West Relief Road, whether it's actually borrowing the money or have the possibility of having to pay back the 38 million or whatever it stands at the present time. So that's where we stand. I can't give any more detail than that, but that's where we are. Thank you. The next question is from Graham Betts.
No, I'm reading this one too. Question is, the Cabinet meeting of the 5th of March 2025 responded to my public question. However, the content was inadequate and I still have not received the information requested under RFI number 6141 made on the 16th of January 2024. The response also fails to answer the specific points I raised. Planning consents 13/03285 full and 13/03534/outline for Darwin's Walk and Bowbrook Meadows in Shrewsbury clearly state in section 6.9.1 that £3,595,554 had been raised for local infrastructure projects. The information provided only accounts for £1,397,373. No other information or reply accounts for the missing sum of £2,198,181. And the claim by the Cabinet that my request has been serviced is untrue. Can Shropshire Council, via its Cabinet, please provide the missing information and respond to my questions in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act and the Nolan Principles of Public Life?
And I'll ask Councillor David Walker, who's the portfolio holder for planning, to respond, please.
Thank you, Liz. Paragraph 6.9.1 and 6.9.2 of the committee report referred to in the question detail the combined infrastructure needs of two applications, 13/03285/FUL and 13/03534/OUT. In total, these two proposals deliver 533 dwellings. For the avoidance of any doubt, 6.91 and 6.92 state, quote, concerns raised by a number of members of the community that local infrastructure cannot support the proposed increase in dwellings are noted. In accordance with the policies C2, CS2 and CS9 and the Council's developer contribution SPD, a financial contribution totalling £3.2415 pounds, including section 278 works, with the overall contribution being £3.5954554 million, with still neighbourhood fund at 15% and administration at 5% are added. The infrastructure cost package is made up of contribution of strategic road network, £759,850, contribution to townwide highway network and sustainable transport, £626,250, contribution to the local road network, £150,000, subsidy to local bus service, £519,480, community facilities, brackets education contribution and on-site play provision, close brackets, £1,184,574, which is a total of £3,241,154. Infrastructure contributions will be provided through a combination of SIL payment, Section 106 agreement, Section 278 highway works, and land where this is being provided for additional community recreation facilities at the request of the council rather than as an on-site design requirement. Amenity open space and natural, semi-natural open space provided as part of the development on-site design requirements. Excuse me. And the cost of their management maintenance are separate and additional. My emphasis, those brackets. Not messing my emphasis. The following table provides the amounts of developer contribution collection from the two linked schemes available to the council to the fund local infrastructure. application 1303285/full, total 106 is £310,540 £310,540. Total still available for infrastructure £431,000, £559. Sorry. Total developer contributions available for use by Shropshire Council for infrastructure is £742,099. Yes. I'm grateful for that. Never. Yeah, no, I just thought, how do I tackle that from top to bottom? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I will deliver with the original paragraphing to help all. What have been the costs of owning Shire Hall in 2025, month by month, and how much has been budgeted to spend on anything associated with the dilapidating monolith until 31st of March 2026? Why has the land's potential development for new housing by a purchasing developer, such a fertile and urgent government priority, not been mentioned publicly as the incoming Cabinet's plan, creating much needed new homes for Shrewsbury against the backdrop of a soon-to-be crashed local plan? Please don't let officers persuade you that these costs cannot be revealed without an FOI request, when refreshed openness and transparency for residents is your welcoming public political mantra. Potentially answering, "We know exactly, but it's commercially sensitive, affected by ongoing site disposal negotiations," may indicate it's a lot, and we're ashamed to admit it publicly. Potentially answering, "We don't know and don't have the time to calculate it," may indicate an eyes off the ball complacency to inherited wasteful expenditure. When will Cabinet instruct officers urgently to limit this pointless waste of money and bring forward a paper for decision making by Cabinet and then full council, or announce a sale of the land to developers?
So thank you very much for your question, and I ask the portfolio holder for finance, Councillor Roger Evans, to answer, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'll read out my prepared question, and it is already being circulated, I understand. The budgeted saving associated with the Shire Hall shown in budget papers is 1.3 million for 25-26, but the target is to deliver an in-year saving of 1.005 million. The difference between these figures of just around 300,000 reflects the residual spend over the year under previous plans that were already agreed and in place. The future of this building and the site is, together with many others, being re-examined. The decant activity has taken much longer than I expected it to be and is now in its final phase, with the remaining tenants relocating and building being cleared of furniture and equipment. The second stage will be the decommissioning of the building, including shutting down and draining systems. Stages 1 and 2, I am at present being told, will conclude this calendar year. The previous administration had planned a stage 3, with that programme running into 2026 for marketing activity. We have been in power for just 20 days, and much work has and is taking place, so we can fully understand how to take many projects forward. Please note, I have not used words like commercially sensitive in this answer. A survey of the building was previously commissioned, and I would hope to make informed comments about this and the findings in the coming weeks. I do believe in sharing as much information as possible and to live up to the claim of being a more transparent and open council. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. That brings to a close the public question time. So we now move on to member question time, and online we have Kate Halliday, who is hopefully going to put her question to us. Are you there, Kate? Hello, Kate. If Kate doesn't appear in a minute, Rosemary, I'm going to ask you if you'll put her question for her. If she's, I can see her, but not, I mean, I can see a picture. It would be better if Kate could put the question for herself. If I move on then and do the next question.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, hello, Kate. We can, loud and clear. Thank you very much. Would you like to put your question?
Yes. Okay. On the 16th of April 25, the Supreme Court unanimously agreed that the terms man, woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to biological sex. Holding a gender recognition certificate does not change sex for the purposes of the Equality Act. The ruling protects single-sex places and services for women and girls, giving utmost clarity that women's rights must be protected in law. It also highlights the continued protection for trans people under the Equality Act. Failure to adhere to the law puts the council at risk of being sued for discrimination. Does the new administration welcome the clarity in law that the Supreme Court ruling brings, and will it be reviewing the council's policies, procedures, guidance and training materials, including a review of services it runs and commissions to ensure it complies with the ruling?
Thank you, Kate, very much. And the answer that I will give you is probably not exactly what you need to hear, but actually is important for us as an organisation. Thank you for the question. Whilst the ruling itself provides clarity, which it does, and it's welcomed, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the EHRC, then released interim non-statutory advice about how to interpret the ruling. Because the EHRC advice was A, interim, and B, non-statutory, the current national position and that of the new administration is therefore to await next steps by the EHRC and by the Women and Equalities Committee before we do anything else.
The next train to arrive at platform 11 will be the 10 Avanti West Coast service to London Euston.
I think you might be sitting on a train.
And London Euston. This train is board off.
Yeah, I know I'm not, but I am at a station. I'm travelling.
Oh, right. OK. So you would not want us to start spending money on something in advance of the final ruling, basically. So we are waiting for that final guidance to come out so that we know exactly where we go with all of this. And that will then be statutory. So thank you, Kate, and enjoy your journey.
Yeah, can I have a follow-on question?
You can.
Yes. Okay, I'm quite worried that you're waiting to implement the law. The ruling confirmed the law has been wrongly implemented by many organisations for a number of years, and there's a rising number of claims for discrimination being successfully made. The there's a number of organisations that are just going ahead and making the changes, and in fact, the interim guidance you're talking about doesn't apply to employers, and so I do have the follow-on question, which is, have you sought external specialist legal advice on this matter? And have the council's insurers been informed about your decision to wait to implement the law?
Basically, Kate, no, we haven't. As yet, as Roger pointed out, we've been in office for 20 days and we haven't got there, but we will do. We will make sure that we have the up-to-date guidance around all of this and all of the support from insurers and so on that we require before we implement anything. But we will always do it in a professional way that looks after the individual, because that's actually where we stand. So as soon as we have that advice, we will get it to you, Kate. So thank you.
Thanks.
The next question is from Julian Dean.
Thank you very much. In June 2022, Shropshire Cabinet committed to working towards a 20-mile-an-hour scheme.
1054, affecting West Coast, London Euston, first class accommodation.
Can we mute her, please?
I'll start again. In June 2022, Shropshire Cabinet committed to working towards a 20-mile-an-hour scheme within the divisions of Porthill and Copthorne. Repeated efforts by councillors to see this implemented resulted in, on the one hand, a recognition of the case for this to also include new pedestrian crossings on the Copthorne Road and the Mount, but on the other hand, no progress towards implementation despite money being allocated. Staffing changes and repeated redesigns resulted in delays and most probably wasted financial resources. Can Cabinet members update the community as to an expected timetable for new pedestrian crossings and for 20-mile-an-hour limits on residential streets in the area? Can they further provide reassurance as to how similar schemes will be better managed from now on, such that councillors can track progress?
Thank you. And I will ask Councillor Rob Wilson to answer this as portfolio holder for transport and economic growth.
Thank you, Heather. I should also point out and note that I am the councillor of Copthorne, where this proposed scheme does cross into, but I don't think they changed the answer. Our manifesto at the council election said that we would introduce 20-mile-an-hour speed limits where there is support of parish council and local councillor. This follows the successful approach taken by the Liberal Democrat and Green coalition at Oxfordshire County Council over the last 4 years. The evidence there and elsewhere shows that there is a reduction not only in collisions and the number of people killed and seriously injured, but savings on car insurance premiums too. We have held initial discussions with council officers about reviewing Shropshire Council's policy on the use of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. The hope is that this will make the process for implementation simpler and more cost effective. We'll share more details about how this review will impact existing proposals for 20-mile-an-hour schemes as soon as possible. In Shrewsbury, this will bring council policy in line with the movement of public space strategy, which suggests, and in quotes, most residential streets across Shrewsbury with a current speed limit of 30 miles an hour would be changed to a speed limit of 20 miles an hour, though some main roads could be exempt from the speed limit and remain at higher speeds where required. On your second point, pedestrian crossings are vital pieces of road infrastructure, and any delays in installation are very frustrating. The council is currently in the process of recruiting a new active travel manager and improving the process for moving forward the installation of pedestrian crossings where they are needed across the county, with one of the first items on my agenda with the successful candidate.
And do you have a supplementary?
I do, yes. So first of all, thank you very much for the answer, and thank you for the positive news with regard to 20-mile-an-hour speed changes. Members in the population in the area, 80% have shown support for that, so that's welcome. And if it needs to go into a wider scheme, then I think people will understand that. Specifically in terms of the crossings, though, that hasn't really provided any reassurance in terms of timetable. I did yesterday share back information which showed that actually, you know, the money is allocated. It's gone through what's called the Internal Infrastructure Board, as I understand it. So I really don't understand why we can't get some clarity over the timing for those crossings. Thank you.
I don't disagree. It's frustrating. I thank you for sharing that yesterday. That was very helpful. I think, and we've raised before, there are There are issues with transparency around things like the internal infrastructure board and SIL funding. It's not transparent enough. It does need to be made more open to the public as to how that money is being spent and can be spent, and the same for members too. Now I've got that information from you yesterday, I'll take that up with the Assistant Director of Infrastructure and I'll keep you informed so we can get to all the timetable for those projects.
Thank you. Okay, we now move on to Councillor Rosemary Dartnell. Oh, sorry, Duncan.
It's on at the station.
I'm very sorry, Duncan. Councillor Duncan Kerr has a question for us, and I hope you're not in the station.
I am. Can I just welcome to all the cabinet members and to yourself as leader? I know it's a daunting prospect, so good luck to you. So the Green Group on Shropshire Council proposed to Council that the waste minimisation strategy be approved in 2021, pointing out that at that time Shropshire had the highest level of household waste arisings per household in mainland England. This was rejected by the Conservative group. We tried again in December 2023, and this time the then portfolio holder agreed to produce a strategy by the 1st of September 2024, and that was the unanimous resolution of Council. A draft strategy was produced, consulted on and reported to and agreed by the Scrutiny Committee, but was never tabled before Council for approval. Without an approved strategy, we have seen measures such as a booking system for the tip introduced and then rescinded, and a badly implemented charging regime for green waste which hasn't met its targets. Both of these very public failings harm our ability to curb household waste arisings and underscore the need for a properly researched and documented strategy to support evidence-based decision making. With the need to establish weekly food waste collections from April 2026, the need for this strategy is becoming ever more critical. So will the Cabinet commit to bringing the completed strategy for approval at the next Council meeting?
Thank you very much, Duncan, and I will be answering this on behalf of Councillor David Basma. Thank you. I can confirm that the Waste Prevention Strategy report that went before Council was approved on the 27th of February 25, as you've referred to. We're currently formatting the strategy, which will soon be on the web pages, but in the meantime, the details can be found on the Council's committee papers for February, and you've got the link on the question. Actually, if you've looked at and I'm coming away from the question a bit, the performance monitoring report, you will see our recycling rates are down, and I will comment on that when we get to that. In relation to food waste, we're currently modelling several options for the collection, and further details will be presented to the Cabinet later in the year once we've confirmed the budget position from government, because this will take extra funding. And we are looking at food waste having to be collected on a weekly basis. Those recycling figures are down because food waste now is not collected with green waste across the board. And therefore, the collection of that food waste is an important part of this strategy. So we are working on it, we are modelling it, we are beginning to work towards exactly this. And you're right, this should be implemented by 2026. But until we have answers around finance from the government, the actual date of implementation is going to be difficult. So thank you very much for that. Now we do move on to, have you got a supplementary question then, Duncan?
No, I'm happy with the answer, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Rosemary Dartnell. Agree the condition, right?
Thank you. We all know Shropshire roads are in poor condition. The Council's previous Conservative administration admitted recently that government investment to bring our roads up to an acceptable standard was short by at least £10 million per annum. A recent local authority study commissioned by Citron UK found Shropshire pothole repairs were the second most expensive in Britain, second only to the Shetland Islands. It's easy to see why islands might face high maintenance costs, but not so easy to explain the Shropshire anomaly. It's likely the survey used a very simple calculation, but it does indicate we have a worryingly high level of cost combined with a road network in serious decline. Fortunately, the Labour government has substantially increased our pothole fund from around £9 million per annum to 33.7 in the current year, granted expressly to bring our road network up to standard. The government has made it clear that to retain this preferential level of funding, local authorities must provide evidence of improved maintenance programmes. The first requirement is to publish criteria online by the 30th of June, including the condition of our roads, how many potholes are being repaired and at what cost. In October, more stringent requirements must be fulfilled. If we do not improve adequately, we will lose funding. So is Shropshire Council Highways changing how it works? And is it on track to demonstrate the government's investment in our roads is being spent wisely for the benefit of all who live in and visit Shropshire?
Thank you, Rosemary. I will answer on behalf of David Basmer. As you know, the new administration has made it clear that dealing with the state of our roads is one of our top priorities. I think every one of the 74 members on this council had potholes at the top of their agenda, on every doorstep. One of our first actions was to increase the number of in-house, that means council operated teams rather than through contractors, dealing with potholes. There are no quick fixes because the amount of investment in our roads over the last several decades is huge. But what we can do is make sure what we're doing is of good quality and that we get best value from the contracts we have. So it's of the highest importance to our residents. The publication referenced was published during the pre-election period. This limited the council's ability to evaluate the challenge and challenge the data used for the article. The reference to additional funding from circa 9 million to 33 million is not quite as good as it first seems. The reality is that funding has only been increased by around 9 million this year, when based on budgets and year-on-year government support is taken into account. But it does mean we do have around 33 million to spend, whereas last year it was about 23 million. So it's a good step forward for us. Significant work has been carried out to develop and optimise the council's service offer to drive down costs and improve efficiency, which culminated in 2 national awards in 24. I must say, I'm not sure that the public noticed those, but there we are, not from what we heard on the doorstep. The cost of pothole repair in Shropshire has consistently been around 80 to 110 for the last 2 years. With regards to the additional funding from central government, whilst this is a step in the right direction, it does nothing to address the underinvestment. And it's one of those pressure areas that we will need to raise with government, because the investment in the basics of the roads is huge, and many of our sea roads are tarmac laid on earth and are old cart tracks, and actually they take an enormous amount of upkeep. So the county's it is also worth adding that the council is responding to the call for data, which is providing to ensure increased levels of investment are sustained from government in the future. So it's all part of that big picture that we do need. And we do have an extraordinary number of roads in Shropshire that many of the more urban areas don't have. And I've forgotten actually how many the south has in roads. And David Basmer would have that at his fingertips, but it is a lot more than most areas, and the south has a lot more than even the rest of the county. So the stresses on our budgets are huge. So, do you have a supplementary, Rosemary?
Yeah, just to come back to the main thrust of the question, which is to say, are we on the targets are kind of heading up fast. The end of June is the first one, and then in October much more details required. Are we on target to meet those?
I know we're working on it. Whether we're on target or not, I am not sure. I will get the answer to you.
Thank you very much.
And we now move on to Councillor Andy Boddington, who is online and has a question around using AMPR cameras.
Thank you, Heather. There's a growing interest in using AMPR to prevent driving offences which disturb neighbourhoods and reduce safety of pedestrians and other vehicles. Lower Court Street in Ludlow is an example of where we have an urgent need to prevent through traffic. Its use as a shortcut has become intolerable, with a constant stream of vehicles entering and exiting the access-only road. In recent weeks, 2 cars have been written off and many more have been damaged in recent years. Several solutions to this have been explored over the years, but none implemented. The view of most people in the community is that only AMPR will check through traffic and ensure drivers use the more suitable and only slightly longer route. I actually have 4 parts of my questions. I'll ask the first 3 first, if I may, Heather. Firstly, what experience does the council have of using AMPR? Secondly, has its use proved effective and are there lessons for rollout elsewhere? Thirdly, what policies or guidelines does the council have for installing AMPR across the county where it will prove beneficial?
Thank you. I will ask Councillor Rob Wilson to answer, please.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Andy, for the question. The enforcement of moving traffic offences using AMPR cameras has been commonplace in London for some time under Part 6 of the 2004 Traffic Management Act. Since May 2022, local authorities outside of London have been able to apply for those same powers. Shropshire was granted these powers in July 2023. To date, those powers have only been used in Shropshire to enforce the 6 trial camera-controlled school streets across the county. We'll be reviewing what has been learned from this programme and assess how Shropshire Council could make further use of these moving traffic offence powers in the fullness of time. And I think, Andy, probably jumping ahead to your 4th question, and then you can have a supplementary afterwards. Meanwhile, council officers are compiling a draft list of potential locations, and I will ask for Lower Court Street in Ludlow to be added to that list.
Thank you for that, Rob. And that's answered my 4 questions. If I may, Heather, I'll ask a supplementary.
I was about to ask you.
Yeah. Given the concerns about safety in the county, there were 23 deaths in the last recorded year in 2024. There have been several this year already, including in Ludlow. Can we make a priority for safety for the council? That means the council developing Vision Zero, no deaths, as an ambition, and bringing in lower speed limits where we've got local agreement. Could that be what the council goes forward with?
Yeah, very happy to answer that question. And as you heard earlier, hopefully in my answer to Councillor Dean, we are looking at the use of 20-mile-an-hour limits in line with what's happened elsewhere, where there is that local support. And in terms of Vision Zero, in the previous council term, I proposed a motion on that to council, and we'll be looking at that with officers as to how we could use that. I think in the meantime, to get us going with this, we have written to the Police and Crime Commissioner, who wrote to us about road safety, and have asked him and his team to look more deeply into not just road safety, but road danger reduction. And to that end, I'm exploring with officers the idea of forming a road danger reduction forum for the county, so we can look with partners at how we can improve that situation on our roads. It's not good enough that people die on our roads every year, and we almost accept it as something that just happens, and we shouldn't.
Good. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the members' questions, and I thank you all for that. They were far-reaching. We will now move on to item 6, which would be scrutiny items, but we have none. And so item 7 on the agenda is the financial outturn. And I will invite the lead member for finance, Councillor Roger Evans, for the report.
Thank you, Leader. Council, by a majority in February 2024, agreed the budget recommended by the Cabinet, or the then Cabinet. This is summarised in Table 1 in the report, which shows an overspend of 34.23 million, or to put it another way, just 52% of the required savings were actually delivered. The main reasons are there amplified in 2.3 in the report. The often reported increased costs incurred by the People's Directorate saw an overspend equivalent to 14.4%, whilst the overspend in the Police Directorate showed a 28% overspend in its allocated. Both are shown as red in the way budgets are classified. The Council, though, was able, as it legally must, to show these could be managed by use of various reserves it had. This, however, shows that the general reserves, instead of being increased, reduced down to the alarming level of just 4.8 million, and the so-called earmarked reserves of 18.8 million. Details are shown in Appendices 6 and 8. The total reserves both very much reduced compared with the levels they were at just a few years ago. This, as stated in the recommendations before us today, are well below what are regarded as appropriate considering local circumstances. The housing revenue account, which is ring-fenced part of the Council's budget, shows a 13% surplus. Again, further details are shown in Appendix 7. Our capital programme was, as shown in Appendices 9, 10, 12, 13 and 14, varied and reprofiled during that budget year. Cabinet is asked to accept and approve the outturn expenditure listed in Appendices 10 and 11, and also retaining the balance of capital assets shown in Part L of the recommendations. The Audit Committee will, of course, examine this report later this year, as it will also the Council's Statement of Accounts, which will contain much more detailed financial information than is at present shown here. Chair, Leader, I move therefore the recommendations 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for those while we're... Thank you, Alex. I have Councillor Dan Thomas from Much Wenlock, leader of the Conservative group, with a question.
Leader, I take the portfolio holder's points around the overspend, but I think it is important to say that the previous administration, working with our officers, made record levels of savings last year, which are proportionately more than any other council. The pressure from social care is considerable and likely to improve, and as a Conservative group, we're here to work with anyone to tackle the crisis. I look forward to seeing solutions from the new administration.
Thank you very much. I have Ruth, who would like to speak now, and then Julian.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to use this opportunity to comment on the commitment of this administration to protecting social care services for vulnerable people within Shropshire. We are very aware of the significant financial pressures that we face, and very dedicated staff have worked very hard over the years to deliver exceptional savings whilst maintaining services. There is still a challenge. Shropshire has an ageing population, and this means that the pressures are here to stay. But working together, we are very committed to making sure that vulnerable people are supported and cared for appropriately. So despite the overspend of in adult social care, significant savings of 17 million were achieved during the year, and that includes by enhancing digital processes, working more closely with early intervention and working closely with partners. And in children's services, we have a very pioneering project of Stepping Stones, which has been helping families to overcome their challenges and stay together when it is safe to do so. So we are, I will reiterate that we are working hard to make sure that the projects and the work that we do supports children and works to avoid them being looked after. So going forward, we are fully aware within the portfolio for social care of the challenges, but we are very committed, as are the staff, to delivering going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Julian.
Thank you. I suppose this is an opportunity, isn't it, just to reflect on our experience in the last 4 years and perhaps even longer. So my impression of the overall picture from Shropshire's point of view is that we have growing demands which are effectively unsustainable for us in social care and for children's services, demands which are a result of combination of years of austerity, underfunding of local government, ageing population, increased inequality in our society because of the nature of the economy that we've lived with for so long, and that's an enormous challenge. And I do absolutely respect that. I think that challenge has been taken on in a really energetic way, and that part of the story, despite the fact those demands are still growing, we do seem to be trying to get to grips with preventative work and with taking measures and working with communities and other organisations to try and address that challenge. The other side of the story seems to be around undelivered savings, and as I understand it from the scrutiny meeting on Monday, many of those undelivered savings are actually around potential income sources within the Place Directorate, the old Place Directorate, which didn't come through. So I suppose my question about that is, how much of that was realistic on reflection, those income sources? How much of that do we think we can deliver in the coming year in terms of savings? And because a lot of that, I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine a fair amount of that is about disposal of assets, is part of the work going on with communities based on the letter from Councillor Alex Wagner. Is part of that work going to include the opportunity for communities to actually take on some of those assets, if that's where some of those savings are being hoped for from? So yeah, thank you.
Shall I take Alex first, and then I'll go to Roger? Okay.
I think I won't answer the finance bit. I'll leave that to Roger. I think the short answer is yes. Should we be looking at parts of the old Place Directorate which town and parishes can start taking on? I think it's fairly simple. We absolutely want to do that. We know that the approach that we're taking is going to take different amounts of time for different councils. We're both from Shrewsbury. We know that that's quite a keen council that might want to move ahead quicker. I know from my inbox that there are some that will need more time, some that might not want to engage in that process at all. Obviously, unpicking precisely which services are where is actually probably the first step. But yeah, in short, yes, that is the policy direction we want to take on that, Gillian.
Thank you. And there is quite a lot of work going on around that, as you will have seen. So, Roger.
Thank you, Leader. First, I did pay tribute in a press release congratulating the staff on the record amount of savings that they made last year, one of the highest in the country. And as a percentage of our budget, yes, I congratulate the staff on the amount that they made. Regarding social care, it is underfunded especially for rural authorities like ourselves, and we have suffered because of the increase that was made by government in the budget statements made in December, when Shropshire Council received a 3.9% increase. Other authorities, especially in the northern part of England, received double-figure percentage increase in their funding. So we are suffering. And as far as the undelivered savings, £15 million, and I highlighted the percentage of their budget was not saved by the Place Directorate. It is a disappointment, and I will be referring to the budget for this year and the examination we're trying to do on all the savings that are there to make sure that what is remaining in the budget to do and the medium-term finance statement when it's delivered later on this year is more realistic. Because that was also pointed out by Grant Thornton in their audit report, which they delivered at the start of this year on previous budgets that were put forward by the administration. They queried whether they were actually realistic or whether they were thought that could be made, which is not a position where this council can continue to live with the continued lowering of our reserves. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Anybody else got anything they would like to raise? Ruth.
Hey, come back, Leader, please. Councillor Evans makes a really valid point around the underfunding level of social care, adults and children's. And that's why I really do want to reiterate that despite those constraints, we will work towards protecting those most vulnerable people in our society and at the same time campaign as widely to increase and get a better funding settlement for Shropshire.
Anybody else? What I'd like to add is that rural counties, particularly ours this last time, but previously as well, have been significantly underfunded for a very long time, because it isn't just that we have a demography that is more elderly, and we have lots of people moving into this glorious county of Shropshire because it's a lovely place to live. But they move here and 15 years later, they need social care. And this has been a significant problem over the last 20, 30 years. And we're now reaching a point where it's very difficult actually to make ends meet. Delivering those services over rural areas, as the Rural Services Network has done lots and lots of work on, costs a lot of money, especially when we have fuel prices the way they are. And sending carers out 25 and 40 miles to do a few drops, seeing people where they are and then travelling on for another half an hour costs us money that actually doesn't have to be found in the more urban areas. So we will be running quite a campaign on this, because we cannot wait for the 2028 review of funding of social care that the government has put in place. That review is welcome. It's just taking too long. And for many councils like us, we will not survive unless we are very, very vocal about the issues that we have across the board. And they are statutory issues. They are services we have to deliver, and we work really well with partners to deliver them at the lowest possible cost. So we're now in a position where 4 in 5 of the pounds that the council taxpayer provides us is spent on social care. And that is not in any way, I do not want the people who require social care and have run out of their own funds to be penalised by the public for us not being able to deliver other services because of the costs of that. There's a statutory obligation for us to do this. And more than that, we need to do that in prevention. We need to do that to make sure that actually the NHS is not overwhelmed. There are a number of different areas that we do need to look at. So we are very, very acutely aware, and I am sure the opposition will join us in lobbying government to make sure that actually we get a fairer deal out of this, because we can't exist without. And I would also say that our staff are so dedicated and work their socks off to actually deliver those services over huge areas. So it's going to be joint work, and we need to jointly do this together so that we move this on in the future. And it does mean that actually the more money the council taxpayer has to spend on this, the more of the non-statutory services that people actually really, really want us to be delivering in leisure and so on. And leisure is an important part of prevention for all of these things. We will be really stressed to be able to fund. That's the situation we're in. And that's the situation that the administration will take on and work really hard to find a way through. So thank you for all of that. Can we look at the recommendations, which are on page 9 of the report and onwards? We've had a proposer and seconder. Can we vote, please, on those? All in favour? Thank you. That's passed unanimously, as I would expect. We now move on the agenda to the Treasury Management Update, Quarter 4. Mr. Roger Evans.
Thank you, Leader. This is largely a technical paper and relates to just Quarter 4 and the time when Council was in the control of a previous administration. A later report covering the whole of 2024-25 budget year will be published later. I move therefore the recommendations as listed in the report.
I have a seconder. Alex, any questions, please? Any comments? Thank you. In which case, I don't think we need to vote on that, but can we vote on that then, please? Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you. I can get back to the agenda. Right, okay, we now go on to performance monitoring. The performance monitoring report is there in front of you, and that's in my domain. So the paper presents the performance position against Shropshire Plan's strategic objectives in Quarter 4 of the financial year 24-25. This uses key performance indicators or KPIs as part of our performance framework to measure, drive and understand delivery of our objectives. The paper describes our position based on the newly updated metrics for this quarter. We have an interactive performance dashboard which should be reviewed alongside this, and in future I would like a link to that to be put on papers so that actually anybody looking at the papers can easily access that, and it's open and transparent. There is a video of how to use it on the bottom of the paper, but it doesn't do exactly what we need. This report has been developed to show detailed information for each of the KPIs included, performance status, trends, benchmarking where available. And the benchmarking is important because then you can see exactly how we're performing against other councils. The dashboard is updated quarterly and a link for this is included in the paper. Performance status red, amber and green is reported based on a variation from the target in future. We will be incorporating trends in the measurement of performance for this report. It should be noted that the report offers a point in time position, such as the dashboard may have been updated since this report was reported and therefore may not reflect the position outlined. So if we go through what it actually says, the performance position is at Quarter 4, 2024. There are 54 measures that have been updated, and these are grey, meaning that they do not have a target set for various reasons, such as they have changed definition. A target is not appropriate. The measures are for reference only, or we are awaiting a baseline to be set. What I might also add is all of this is a really important training point for all members of the council so that everybody understands that, and we will try and put that in place so that it isn't just the cabinet and the opposition leaders that actually understand the dashboard, but actually every member does. Of the 41 newly reported KPIs with targets, 53.7%, that's 22, are above their target. They're in green. 14.6%, that's 6 KPIs of indicators, were similar to their target, amber, and 31.7% are below their target and showing up as exceptions. And it's the exception reporting that's the important thing. And I would always say that actually there are sometimes that exception reporting should be green because you've done very well, not just that you're failing, because I think that's quite an important point to people, certainly our staff. Given the financial constraints, this was expected as a reasonable performance position for this quarter, with 68.3% of newly updated indicators above or similar to their target. Improvements above target of note include our work on working across the system to support our communities means that we have more adults receiving community-based services, meaning they're less reliant on the council. We have lower numbers of young people not in employment, education or training than the value for the West Midlands. That doesn't mean to say we don't have to improve it. We always do, because young people out of work often continue not to be in work. Our work to reduce our carbon footprint is working as we have generated more renewable energy through solar means than anticipated, and I think that whole area needs some more significant work. Our hard-working staff have received more compliments than previous quarters and more than our target, and that is important actually for staff morale, that they do get those. So, of the 13 exceptions, some of significant note include we are significantly below our target to process educational healthcare plans, the EHCPs, within 20 weeks. And I know that is a real concern to the portfolio holder and to me. As with other councils, we continue to struggle with the increased numbers of requests, while the restructure of the team has also impacted on performance in Q4. Whenever you reorganise anything, it always hits outcomes for a while until it embeds. We continue to look at a new way of meeting this need through managing demand and utilising innovative means such as AI to support this work, HP 31. We need to monitor the impact of our changes to garden waste, as I referred to before. We've seen a reduction in the recycling rate since charges were introduced. This will need to be monitored to understand the balance between these service decisions. However, it should be noted that we would expect these rates to fall as green waste was introduced at the same time period, but also the food waste was stopped being collected, so that also impacts on it. As we were told by many residents on the doorstep recently, there is significant dissatisfaction with the state of our highways. We've already had questions and so on around that. It is clear to see that our staff are facing significant pressure and uncertainty with higher sickness absence and turnover than targeted. Therefore, we need to continue to support them as we implement much needed change to address the challenges we face. And there's a survey going out to staff at the moment, which is called the Pulse Survey, which will enable a deeper dive into all of that. And I must say that staff who are happy and have job satisfaction give far more than staff who are very unhappy and feel they have no job satisfaction. And that is an important part of the future for us. And we have to look at ways and means of trying to improve that across the board. It's recommended that Cabinet note the progress to date in achieving outcomes of the Shropshire Plan. And secondly, confirm that the KPIs currently agreed remain the same for 25-26 until aligned to the refresh of the Shropshire Plan in 25-26. So we will be refreshing all of that and looking at those KPIs because they may not be exactly what we meant to need to measure as an administration for the future. And that will be work across the board. And I do hope that actually many people can get involved in that when we get to doing that, because the outcomes need to be outcomes for everybody. And the measurements around those need to be realistic and mean something to our residents. So I move those. I think I need to do that when I get to the bottom of the report. So there's just conclusions here, really. So I move the recommendations, and can I have a seconder, please, Alex? Thank you. So any questions? Rosemary.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a question about HP 19, which is at 4 point. Sorry, excuse the glasses. I've left my glasses at home. 4.6. The last sentence, this is about permanency planning for children who are looked after. The last sentence says a large proportion of those who are not deemed to be in stable placements have moved to a placed with parents placement as their most recent change. I just wanted to ask how, when we get to that position, obviously that's considered not to be a stable setting yet, how much more monitoring and help is given to settle children back into their parental home?
Either Ruth or Tanya, whoever's going to
pick up that technical question. So we're working really hard as a council in terms of our Stepping Stones projects, in working with families to step their child back to placement with parents where it's safe to do so. And when we do that, it's really close monitoring to make sure that that family is still receiving the right support to be able to long-term look after that child. So we see it as a really positive step forward in that kind of overall permanency for our children to be placed rightly back with their families. When safe to do so, we would never step away though. Initially, for various reasons, we might work with that family for several months, even several years, to ensure that they are well supported to look after that child in that family setting.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you. In which case, can I have a vote, please? Right. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Right. We now move on to, I found the right place for the agenda. The item 10, which is financial monitoring period 1, and I call on Councillor Roger Evans, portfolio holder for finance, please.
Thank you, Leader. As has been stated many times, this is just for the first 4 weeks of the present financial year. We await with trepidation the financial statement concerning the spending review being made today in Parliament to see if they have taken account of the financial problems we and many other local authorities are facing, and so make more cash, increase the grants that are allocated to local rural authorities like ours. All our staff are working extremely hard to provide the services and savings against the backdrop all councils are facing, and I do pay tribute to them and the £47 million they saved last year. As stated earlier today, our reserves are at a dangerous level due to the continued failure of some areas to deliver many of the savings that they were expected to make during previous years. Period 1 is an early snapshot of the likely position, and more will be known when we see the period 2 and 3 updates. An extensive reorganisation has taken place and budgets reallocated. Some are looking at them for the first time. However, it cannot be overemphasised the issues we at present face as a council. The budget that was agreed last February, albeit by the last administration, showed we need to save £60 million this year. Many of the savings being listed are a carryover from last year. Some, as I said earlier on, feel will be very hard to achieve, whilst we should be building up reserves to a level that we and our auditors feel are a safer level. Already listed in item 8 are both known pressures we face and a number of savings it is felt will be very hard for us to make. The level of reserves shown at just £394,000, just £394,000 on the size of budget we have are just not acceptable. I and the finance team are asking all budget holders and cabinet members to take a hard look at their budgets, We may disagree with some of the items listed as savings by the previous administration, but there is a very urgent and real need to take steps that will lead to an increase in the level of general reserves and reduce the overspend as listed in item 8 in this report by making other replacement savings. I move the recommendations, Chairman.
Thank you, and I presume I have a seconder. Thank you. Questions? Julian.
I just make a comment because I think Councillor is absolutely right to refer to today's announcements or potential announcements, and whether there'll be good news or not, and very possibly won't be good news. It is absolutely clear that the amount of investment in public services for this council and for other councils is far, far too low. It's becoming clear to many people that we should have had a wealth tax, which is what the Green Party has been calling for a very long time. It's not something we can debate particularly here, but we do have to be honest about the context we're in, and I hope that this administration will be pushing as hard as possible. Our MPs, I was disappointed, frankly, with the Shrewsbury MP's response to the settlement in November, when she seemed to sort of dismiss the way that Shropshire had got a really particularly raw deal. I think we need to be pushing our MPs as hard as possible on funding for this local authority and in general for public services.
Thank you. Anybody else? You're very quiet today. Thank you very much. Okay, in which case I presume that is agreed. Unless, thank you. Right. We will move on to telecare charging consultation. And I'll move to Councillor Ruth Houghton.
Thank you, Leader. I'm taking the paper as having been read, but just to comment that the telecare is a range of assistive technologies which are designed to help people live independently in their own homes, and it's a really important part of the service that's offered by social care to support individuals, adults and children, to live independently and at home. Shropshire Council has not previously charged for this service, which is unusual compared to other local authorities. So the proposal today is to implement a charge which will cover the cost of equipment, monitoring, staffing and administration, and the charge would be at £3.45 per week, with a start-up charge of £35 for new users. Crucially, some people will be exempt from paying, and those will be those who have been assessed as unable to pay under the social care charging format, and for individuals in receipt of up to 6 weeks reablement following hospital discharge. Now, we're aware that for some people this will be an extra burden for them in particularly tight finances in some instances, so we're very committed to making sure that people who are unable to pay and who are having this outside of a Care Act assessed package of care are signposted and supported to access eligible benefits such as pension credit and attendance allowance. And I think it's upon all of us here to support individuals to access those benefits and signpost them in any circumstances, not just in relating to paying for telecare. So I move the recommendation. It has been out to public consultation. I move the recommendation this morning. Thank you.
I have a seconder from Alex. Thank you very much. Questions around it, Julian?
Thank you. I suppose this is the first proposal you've brought forward with an increase of charging to members of the public. The first of those, and I hate the term, difficult decisions. I'm minded, and I'd just be interested in your view about this. I'm minded to call it in, not because I think that it's a wrong decision. It feels like it may well be an appropriate decision, but because this is exactly the sort of thing that pre-decision scrutiny could have had a good look at, that we could have got wider member views and support for this move. And I think that there is still time to do that. I noticed that the Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee is actually cancelled later this month. It could be held as a one-off to do a quick appropriate piece of scrutiny on this in order for it to come back to Cabinet. You could probably still stick to the same timetable. It just feels to me like it was a good opportunity to use the process which I believe that you're supporting, which is to make sure that there is as much pre-decision scrutiny as possible. So I'd be interested in your view about whether you would support that sort of call, and if you think that's an appropriate use of councillors' time. To me, it feels like an absolutely appropriate thing, given that this is the first time you're introducing a new charge.
Ruth, do you want to answer that?
Yes, Leader, thank you. Thank you, Julian. We had a long debate about whether, between us, whether we should bring this paper forward. And the basis for bringing it forward is partly the context of the financial position we find ourselves in, which Councillor Evans has laid out this morning and set out this morning. But secondly, because there was a full public consultation, it was so far in the down the pipeline for introduction, it would have just delayed matters, pushing it on. So I do take your point. If it needs further scrutiny, then we can look at that. But this was a decision not taken lightly. We accept it's an additional charge, but it also does put in some equitable approach towards this, so that people who can afford to pay can fund, support for those that can't, and for support for those that are receiving their telecare as an assessed part of a care package, continue to receive that care under the Care Act regulations.
I take your point about pre-scrutiny, and had this been coming forward during the administration, we would automatically have done that. It's a really important point. So absolutely. Because we are where we are with it, I think it might be difficult to do that. I will sit here and have a cogitation about it before the end. But actually, the point about pre-scrutiny is a well-made one, and it is one we will use in the future, as you know. I think the most important thing about this is not that it sits well with us. It doesn't. It was heavily consulted on, and the people who are paying now are those people who are self-funders. They pay for their care anyway. Our concern, when we considered whether it should come forward or not, is that some of those people who are still self-funders have a low income, but they have too much money in the bank. So if you've got more than £23,250 in the bank, they will still be being asked to pay for this. They may not have that much more, and then they will dip under. So, which is why we are at pains to make sure that these people who will be asked to pay do get all the support to go through the benefit system. And it would not change otherwise, because all the rest of the care for a self-funder is paid for by that self-funder, which is just the system that which is a statutory system that we have to rely on, whether it's the right thing or not. That's the way it is. And until we get a proper review of adult social care, that's the way it sits. So it's not a great thing. I will sit here and listen to any more of the debate and think about whether we need to do this, but it does need, because it's so far down the road now, it does need to be implemented quickly. So whether there's a point around calling it in and looking at it, I'll think about it in just a minute. Rosemary.
Yeah, thank you. I understand the dilemma. I mean, and of course, if people can afford to pay, then that's welcome, and there is an impetus. There are other authorities. I understand that we're alone, or a very rare authority, for not charging for this. But as always, it's the people who are in the marginal position that we're concerned about. So we've been told that the evidence from Telford and Wrekin and from the consultation implies that we would potentially lose 500, 540 of our subscribers. And the question is, what's the evidence beyond that? Do we have evidence beyond that? What happens to those 540 people? What happens to the people has happened to the people in Telford and Wrekin who desubscribed as a consequence of the charges? Because, of course, that could end up, one, costing us much more, but putting people in a vulnerable people in a very vulnerable position. Inadvertently, I can see that. So I think we would also express concern in our group about whether or not, the case is made on the one hand, but what about the things that we don't know, the consequences, potential consequences?
Ruth.
Thank you, Rosemary. I would draw members' attention to the fact that there has been an equality impact assessment concluded. It's been fully consulted upon, and where there would be a charge applied for people who may withdraw, that the council would go back, reassess, make sure that those benefit checks are undertaken and signed up to. So, without being a benefits expert by any means, attendance allowance is a non-means tested benefit. The sort of support that you can receive from telecare could indicate eligibility for that benefit. So it's important that we take a holistic view of that and make sure that people are really supported well to access what they're entitled to. So it's a really difficult decision. Nobody wants to make additional charges and for particular protected groups, but this service, as you say, we are an outlier in not making a charge. It does support people to live at home. It's particularly popular with families who may live a distance away, having that reassurance that their family has access to remote alarm systems and other telecare. But telecare is wide and varied, and it suits different people in different ways. So I go back and move the recommendations, but the benefits advice and support and reassessment is really important.
I have a number of speakers now. I have Duncan on screen, then Dan, and then Alex. So Duncan, please.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, you mentioned the equality impact assessment. That does actually show negative impacts onto people with protected characteristics, the elderly and the disabled. And obviously it worries me that one of the first actions, and I do understand the financial situation the council's in, but is to consider an action which has negative impacts on some people with protected characteristics. So I just think we need to think very carefully. I do understand that this is a long-standing and your urgency to progress, but I don't think we should do that at the cost of people who are affected by it. So my view is that we could do a very quick calling of this. We could have an urgent meeting of the People's Overview and Scrutiny Panel, and we consider, is there any way that we can mitigate the impacts on what is a key preventative service? We talk a lot about prevention. Well, this is a preventative service. We know that, and we only need one or two of those people to not have access to it and to get into a health situation as a result of that. And the costs of that to the community, and I know it's not to the council, but the community would be a lot higher to continuing with this preventative service.
Do you want to come back on that, or shall we go to Dan? Yeah.
Yeah, Leader, just to say that due to the financial position of the council and despite the incredible savings made by the previous administration, and I'm sure this is something you're reluctant to do, but I don't think it sits well with anyone, but I dare say it is probably necessary and it's probably too far down the road for scrutiny.
Thank you. Alex.
I just wanted the suggestions made about scrutiny. Obviously, there's pretty considerable cross-party interest in this. I know that Ruth and the officers have kicked it around quite a lot to try and come up with something more palatable, because there's no beating around the bush. This isn't a pleasant decision to have to make. What I was going to suggest is, I know given sort of constraints on officer time, doing a full call-in and having an emergency meeting might, be a bridge too far, but some sort of cross-party working arrangement before this is implemented and some sort of further discussion with all the parties, I think might be a useful way to make sure that the sort of implementation of this policy is done in the best possible way. I suppose the point that Ruth is making as portfolio holder and that we would make is, we do need to make this decision. We do need the revenue. We don't see the point in waiting longer than is already scheduled. But I think if further cross-party discussions are needed on how it is implemented and how the impacts could be best mitigated, I think that would probably be sensible if it's agreeable. I know the time, something less formal, I suppose, would be my potential suggestion. That saves officer time as well, of course.
I'm all for saving officer time. I'm just not sure what informal conversations are going to achieve, because we're also having those informal, well, we're having formal conversations about it here. My concern is that either we do some scrutiny on it or we don't, because just sitting in a room, I'm not sure we're going to get more agreement. So I would actually like to go back to Ruth and Tanya to look at the urgency and answer what is the urgency of implementing this, because this may be one of those hard decisions. I do think we've put a lot of the mitigations in place that we can do and we will support. But if there's anything better that we can come up with, that would be great. But we did think long and hard about it. But it's entirely now up to the portfolio holder and the executive director, I think, because it's your budget and it's your people that you're dealing with, as well as our residents.
Yes. Okay, well, firstly, in response to Duncan's questions, I do note your question, Duncan. Thank you for that, and the protective characteristics. So I think where we have identified protected characteristics, people with protected characteristics that may be disadvantaged, that we would prioritise, make sure that the package of care that they entitled to and assessed for is eligible for is fully implemented as appropriate. I think it might be helpful. I take the point about pre-scrutiny and cross-party, but we are in a very difficult financial position. The proposed implementation date would be October the 1st. I suggest that we perhaps draw up an implementation plan that we can share outside of Cabinet, with members and take any urgent questions then. But we are all tasked with managing our budgets. This will contribute to the savings that are required. There shouldn't be a massive impact on individuals because we are aiming to mitigate that through additional support so that people can afford to pay. So my offer is that we would work as a portfolio holder and director and the directorate to produce an implementation plan that addresses the mitigation measures and sets out what we would do.
Right. I think on those grounds, then we need to move to the recommendations and have a vote on those, please. So all those in favour, please. And that is understanding how difficult this is, and it really is difficult. But it is those people who pay at the moment, not those people who don't pay. And the mitigations should help those who are in a difficult position, and we will only ever do anything, we won't do anything that's going to really impact those people who really can't afford. But we come back to that point about pre-scrutiny. So in future, whenever there's one of these, we will be doing pre-scrutiny. We're just not in the position that we could have done it on this occasion. So thank you for all of that. And thank you for your input today. Right, the next thing on the agenda is the pyrolysis second site increase in budget. And this item has been withdrawn. In discussion with the lead officer and the portfolio holder, I felt that the report needed some amendments, which would result in the decision being required to be made by full council. In addition, given that so many councillors are new to the council and therefore also this rather technical but important matter will not be known to them, I've requested that full briefing sessions should be provided in order that the decision can be made with colleagues being fully informed of the details around this, and as a result, the report has been moved to the council meeting on the Thursday, the 17th of July. And I will be urging all members to take part in those briefings so they absolutely understand what pyrolysis is, where it's being built in the future, if it's being built, and the implications around all of that and the possible income from around all of that. So it's really important that we get all of our groups to take part in that briefing so that we have a fully informed debate in July. Thank you. Right. Item 13. Application by Basin Hill Parish Council for Basin Hill Parish to be considered as a neighbourhood area. And I move to Councillor David Walker, Portfolio Holder for Planning.
Thank you, Leader. The report seeks, sorry, it seemed to have gone low. Approval for Basin Hill Parish area to apply for a neighbourhood area in order to develop a neighbourhood plan, a neighbourhood development plan. It aligns with the goals in the Shropshire Plan, namely a healthy economy and a healthy environment. Neighbourhood plans are driven by local communities and help shape development with detailed policies that complement the local development plan. The officers have recommended proceeding with the designation as there's no valid reason against it. I'm sure there'll be many coming, so I'm happy to propose a recommendation.
Dan.
Thank you, Leader. I wholeheartedly support this idea as someone who currently chairs the Much One Lock Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group in Much One Lock. I understand the importance of working with the community and giving their say in what development should look like. And if approved, I wish Basin Hill Parish Council very well in their endeavours.
Wonderful. Any other comments? No. Did we? You proposed and you seconded. That's great. All those in favour? Unanimous. So now we move to actually, can I thank the public and the press and everybody for coming to this first cabinet, and in the future I hope that more of the papers coming to council have been scrutinised before we get there and so on. So thank you for coming, and I now move exclusion of the press and the public. So to resolve that in accordance with the provisions of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, paragraph 10.4, the council's access to information rules for public and press are excluded from the meeting during consideration of the exempt minutes and only the exempt minutes.